Hello, and welcome to the next in the Effective Writing Center series of workshops, and our last for this academic year. I'm Dan Gallagher, Director of the EWC. Tonight's workshop is titled Listen Up, the Key to Effective Workplace Communication, and is being presented by Michelle Bowman and David Taylor. Michelle Bowman is coordinator of the EWC's Writing Fellows Program and an adjunct professor for UMUC, teaching Introduction to Professional Writing. She has a BS in psychology and a master's degree in distance education and e-learning. David Taylor is a senior advisor at the Effective Writing Center, where he has worked since 2004 as a database advisor and writing fellow. A Carnegie Fellow at the University of Mississippi, David received his doctoral degree in composition and rhetoric. To ask a question during the broadcast, please feel free to use the chat feature in YouTube right below the viewing window. This workshop, like all of our workshops, will be archived for future viewing in the Effective Writing Center's Google Plus community. You can also feel free to add any questions there if you're viewing this after the fact. And now let's begin tonight's workshop, Michelle.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Dan. It's great to be with everyone tonight for this Google Hangout on listening, the key to effective workplace communication. The title itself is sort of stunning. Why isn't speaking, writing, or presenting the key to workplace communication? The answer is simple. Studies show that we spend half of our workday, 50%, listening. However, we misinterpret or change 70 to 90% of what we hear. 70 to 90%. Is it any wonder that 60% of all workplace problems are related to listening? We pay a huge price for our ineffective listening. More than 60% of unexpected medical events involving death or injury are caused by communication errors, according to the Joint Commission, a nationwide hospital accrediting agency. In fact, an estimated 80% of all serious medical errors in the United States involve some form of miscommunication. That's scary. Fortunately, listening errors in our lives are usually far less disastrous. Some cause embarrassment, such as not remembering the name of a new acquaintance. Others cause minor inconvenience, such as having to pay a fee for missing a doctor's appointment, or arriving late for a lunch, or arriving on the wrong day. Been there, done that. However, when it comes to the workplace, poor listening is a serious issue, costing staggering amounts of money. One of the most often cited reports on the cost of poor listening in the workplace was done in 2013 by Group Vision Research. Warning, you'll find some of these findings hard to listen to. It's estimated that 11 million meetings take place in the US each day. Group Vision found that Fortune 500 companies, America's largest companies, waste 75 million per year in those meetings due to ineffective listening. Those are big fish. SIS International Research of New York reports that 60% of small to mid-sized businesses also lose significant money due to ineffective listening. SIS cites the typical example of a business with 100 employees who spend an average of 17 extra hours per week clarifying spoken communications. The cost of that small company? Over $500,000 each year. That's a make or break amount for most businesses. Is it any wonder that listening is often called the forgotten communication skill and the lost art? You can find scholarly articles and books in their second editions with those exact titles. But with this great problem comes great opportunity. With so many employees lacking such an important skill, you have a chance to truly stand out being an effective, active listener. Employers know that listening is a problem that affects their bottom line. That's why employers value good listeners. Listening is considered the hardest soft skill, which are your interpersonal or people skills that make you valuable beyond your job-specific knowledge. The importance of active listening begins with the job interview, the first time you have a chance to show off your interpersonal skills. Active listening can significantly reduce the nervousness you feel during an interview because it redirects your focus from what is going on inside of you to the needs of your prospective employer. By placing your focus through active listening squarely upon the interviewer, you prove that you are interested in the organization's challenges and successes, ready to help them problem solve work issues, and you are a team player as opposed to a self-absorbed job candidate. This is just one example of where effective listening skills can give you a significant advantage. With that in mind, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague David to tell us more.
Thank you, Michelle. To improve our listening, we first must understand the problem and then pinpoint exactly what we can do to become better listeners in order to take advantage of those amazing opportunities that Michelle just outlined. So, first, what's the problem? Dr. Krista Arnold from the University of North Florida summarizes it well. Everyone believes they're a good listener. People assume they automatically can listen if they can simply hear. That's what it comes down to, confusing hearing with listening. As the statistics above show, hearing, receiving the signal, and listening, understanding the signal, are not the same thing. Yet we tend to live our lives as if they were and pay the price. Listening requires making sense out of those sound waves beating against our eardrums. Making sense out of them requires two keys to effective listening: self awareness and conscious effort. We must be consciously aware that it's time to focus on listening. Why? Because the default human condition is passive listening. And because passive is our default state, we must dig down and make our best effort to engage in one of the 5 types of active listening. And here they are: comprehension, listening to understand and retain for better, later use; discrimination, listening for emotions and values underneath the content; critique, listening to evaluate what we hear; empathy, listening to identify with the other person and their point of view; and finally, appreciation, listening for stimulation and enjoyment. Although each type requires different skills, they all require a conscious effort and a desire to maintain listening focus. It's also important to know what type of listener you are. Not being aware of your ingrained preference can limit your ability to listen effectively. The Watson Barker Weaver Listener Preference Profile lists 4 types. Now, although we all possess some characteristics of each, usually one preference will dominate, depending upon the situation. For example, the people oriented listener is most concerned with relationships, sometimes to the detriment of the message. The action oriented listener concentrates intensely on the task at hand, not necessarily how others are processing or reacting to that message. The content oriented listener's need to evaluate everything means they can get so caught up in judging one part of a message, they miss out on the other parts. The time oriented listener fixates on brevity and efficiency, a fixation that can result in impatience and interruptions. So now I'll turn it back over to Michelle to tell us about some of the most common traps we fall into as listeners. Michelle?
Thank you, David. The point you're making is clear. We all listen differently based on many factors. This variability underscores the need to be aware of how we are listening and to exert conscious control over it. For example, Adele Lynn in the Emotional Intelligence Activity book provides a self awareness exercise for effective listening. Rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 5 for the following, where 1 means no way and 5 is, oh yeah, that's me. Are you a faker, someone who nods, makes eye contact, and gives uh-huhs, but their mind is somewhere else? Maybe you're an interrupter, someone who rarely allows the other person to finish or gives off signals that they want to speak. Many of us are evaluators, judging the speaker and forcing content into our own framework without being open to the speaker's context and point of view. For the happy hooker, a speaker's words serve only to activate their own memories or ideas, which they then proceed to talk about, regardless of what the speaker's message was. Indeed, if you recorded most social conversations, you would see 2 unrelated monologues that just happen to be occurring at the same time. Everyone knows a rebuttalist, someone who listens mainly to find something to disagree with or try to top with their own story. And finally, some of us are advice givers. When listening, they try to fix it rather than wanting someone, a speaker simply wants to vent, to voice emotions without being given advice or to be fixed. The higher your score, the more work you must do to become a better listener, which is summed up with the phrase active listening. Now, David will present some of the keys to active listening and how you can employ them.
Thanks, Michelle, and I promise I won't try to fix anything. Let's call this first key silence is golden. Note that the words silent and listen contain the same letters, just in different order. Or as the old saying goes, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we talk. There's even a biblical verse about it. James 1:19, be quick to listen, slow to speak. And if God and the Bible aren't enough, how about some good old-fashioned Western physiology? You can't listen if you're talking. A second key is the eyes have it. Now, we've emphasized the importance of making a conscious choice to control your mind in order to listen effectively. A direct way of achieving this control is with our eyes. You see, maintaining strong eye contact does more than signal your interest. It allows you to control the inputs your brain receives. You can observe a speaker's nonverbal language, which is said to account for 80% or more of a person's actual verbal message. Bonus tip, if you're on a phone call or a web conference without video, close your eyes and picture the person speaking, or see each word as a mental image. Your goal, as always, is to replace your mind's inner chatter with the message being sent to you. As we've said, listening effectively means quietening that inner monologue running constantly in our heads. One of the most powerful tools for doing this is questions. This means responding to someone first with a question and not a statement. For example, you can ask for an example. For instance, such as, what's an example? Or you could ask for an elaboration. What else? Please tell me more. Could you elaborate on that a bit? You see, in other words, after the first person finishes, ask a question that calls for more than a simple yes or no answer. These questions signal you are listening, want to hear more, and good interviewers know that answers to follow-up questions often deliver the most revealing information. Michelle, let me ask you a question. What other keys to effective listening would you add?
Thanks, David. Here are a few I feel strongly about. The first is empathy, the power of caring. In other words, there's more to effective listening than paying attention. To really understand what someone is saying, it's important to care about the person and their message. If the other person is important to you, you won't make the effort. If the other person isn't important to you, you won't make the effort. This means listening to understand not only to what is said, but also what a person is feeling. This is another instance of the need to consciously clear away the ego and let the other person in. A key technique for achieving this empathy, the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes, is reflection or paraphrasing. With this technique, you wait until the person has finished speaking, pause, then say things like, so what I'm hearing is, sounds like you're saying, tell me more about what you mean when you say, or I may not have understood you correctly. What I thought I heard you say was. Reflecting or paraphrasing serves 3 important purposes. First, it signals your interest in what the other is saying. Second, it helps ensure that you understand correctly. Remember, we misinterpret 70 to 90% of what we hear. Third, it makes the other person feel understood and therefore more open to genuine give and take. And now, one final technique we all could use at times. Hold it. Interrupting wastes time, frustrates the speaker, and limits understanding. Interruptions also send an unintended negative message. What you have to say is more important, which can be interpreted as disrespect. Treat the other person as you wish to be treated. Show respect and courtesy at all times. Allow the speaker to finish each point, then pause just to be sure. Thank you for not interrupting, David. Any final thoughts?
So what I hear you saying, Michelle, is it's time to wrap this up?
Correct, David. Great, effective listening skills.
Thank you. I'd like to end by quoting from Stephen Covey, author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, who says about listening, most people do not listen with the intent to understand. They listen with the intent to reply. And that underscores the single point we've tried to emphasize throughout this presentation. Active listening does not come naturally. It requires concentration and determination. Old habits are hard to break, but the good news is, once acquired, the new habit of listening effectively will quickly become your new default. And the rewards, wow, you'll become a better communicator, improve your workplace productivity, increase opportunities for your advancement, and develop better relationships in all areas of your life. So thank you all very much for stopping by for our workshop. Here are our references in case you want to dig deeper into any of these topics. It was a real pleasure. And now we'll turn it back over to Dan.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you, David. I'll just reiterate at this point, anybody watching this video, if you have any questions for us in the EWC, you can feel free to comment on YouTube underneath this video, on our Google Plus community page, underneath the posting related to this video, or you can reach out to us in the Effective Writing Center at any point in time by emailing writingcenter@umuc.edu. That's Writing Center as one word. This is our last workshop for the 2017-2018 school year. We will be back in September, so please feel free to contact us any way you like over the course of the summer, and I hope that you'll view this and our other videos and that they'll have a positive impact on your learning. Thank you all, and good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you. Good night.